Professor Lähnemann, we have already talked to you twice, back then as Chair of German Studies at Newcastle University, and since 2015 you have held the Chair of Medieval German Literature and Linguistics at the University of Oxford. We would like to know what has changed for you.
Many thanks for having me again. I think it's a really important initiative to have this network of women, and I've experienced this kind of community of female scholars developing while I was at Newcastle, and there has been a real change in the academic landscape, I'd say, over the last 10 years or so, with women taking on more visible roles at least in British academia. So when I started in Oxford in 2015, I was the first woman on a statutory chair in modern languages at the faculty. And immediately after I'd started, then the second chair was taken by a woman, Katrina Seth, in French literature. And I'd say there is a real kind of generational shift now going on. In terms of what has changed for me coming from Newcastle to Oxford, probably the biggest change for me is that I'm much more now teaching my own research area. So I quite enjoyed in Newcastle having the width of German studies. So doing things like discussing Kurt Schwitter's, the artwork is still behind me, modern artists, hosting writers in residence. But my own medieval research was more or less separate from what I was teaching. And now in Oxford, I have the opportunity to directly integrate research and teaching, particularly having these stunning collections at hand. So the Bodleian Library has one of the largest collections of medieval German manuscripts, and they are currently being digitized together with Wolfenbüttel. So there is a joint initiative in digital humanities, and that's really exciting. So I'm taking my students every term to look at different manuscripts, and that's something that even during lockdown we managed to keep going, because it's so important to have this direct material aspect. So that's probably the biggest change for me from Newcastle to Oxford.
So it's going to be more interactive, or it has been more interactive since 2015 for you and your students as well.
Yeah, because we have these books and other resources, the museums with fantastic collections. So I always do hands-on sessions. I start each of my courses with a stroke a book session, where students learn to read books also as cultural objects, and to be able to engage with that in Britain is unparalleled in Oxford.
Very interesting. So you have contacted AcademiaNet to specifically introduce the project, the Nuns Network, which is supervised by you and Professor Eva Schluthäuber. And can you tell us what exactly is it about?
So it's a rather exciting find. 3 huge letter books, which were copied by nuns in the late 15th, early 16th century in the convent of Lüne, near Lüneburg. And they are the largest group of writing by women from the Middle Ages that we know of, not just in Germany, but pretty much worldwide. And they hadn't been edited and barely noticed in research. And the wealth of knowledge we learn about living in the Middle Ages communicating, the agency of women, but also linguistic insights. So the nuns are really skilled communicators. They write in highly elaborate Latin, sometimes in verse even, to the bishop. They write in business style to their trade partners, because the convent was financed via the Hansek trade unit. So the salt produced in Lüneburg financed the living of the nuns. And for me, the most exciting part actually is the intranet they are building up by communicating between the convents. So it was a whole monastic landscape of female religious houses around Lüneburg, and they work together on a lobby level. So if there is a new priest to be installed in Lüneburg, if they want to get a good price to have bookbinding done in bulk, they would exchange letters between the convents, and they do it in a what has been called a language of intimacy. So in a much more colloquial style than any of the official letters we knew so far from the Middle Ages. It's more like WhatsApp communication of casual emails. So they mix Latin and Low German in the way in which they probably would have spoken. So it's the closest to medieval orality we can get. The only parallel example I know is from Luther's Tischreden, which were taken down by his students, and they were trying to catch this colloquial style. And he also mixes Latin and the vernacular all the time. So on a material and linguistic level, it's very exciting. On a like, more existential level, I find it fascinating to see how parallel this network of convents works to Oxford communication between colleges, which I think is, in a way, the closest parallel in contemporary times you can find. Both the convents and the colleges being institutions going back to the High Middle Ages and shape-shifting through the periods, but preserving a kind of core message of core mission to educate, to communicate, for spiritual enrichment, regardless whether you define that as a Christian message or more as a secular education. So I've learned a lot from the nuns also in how to navigate the politics of university life, how to work together, lobbying. And we appointed a new principal 2 years ago as head of house, and I was just at that point editing the part where the nuns are choosing a new provost for their convent. And there are so many parallels and insights you can learn from the 15th century network for the 21st century network.
Exciting indeed. And you already mentioned parallels. So what do you think modern women's networks can learn from the nuns of the Middle Ages?
Definitely networking and how to use the power of language, how to communicate needs, but also a form of responsibility. So I was thinking of the nuns when asked just recently to help with a mentoring scheme for early career people. So how to take responsibility for the next generation of novices, whether in convent life or in academia. And the nuns take their education really as a task, as a mission to communicate. So they would write letters whenever in their family at home there was a significant event. So they would advise on a wedding or how to lead a good Christian life, but also if the nephew was about to go to university, what to do and what to not to do, to beware of in university life. Very important when there was a bereavement in the family, writing letters of comfort, quoting their knowledge of scripture, of religious literature. So really taking their role as models serious for society.
And there's also a film series on the project which was published by the Gerda Henkel Foundation.
Yeah.
And to what extent were you personally involved in bringing your research closer to the public in this way?
I was really impressed by how well the Henkel Foundation had honed this concept. They have been running this Lisa for at least 10 years or so. And they have a very good film team. So the film team closely discussed with Eva Schlothäuber and me the whole narrative that we wanted, the storyboard, what message we wanted to communicate, and it's astonishing the reach that this has. And I was also quite interested in the kind of professional side of how to communicate research well, how to link it with a visual side. And it came at just the right moment before lockdown would have made it impossible, but also at a time when the interest in online available content has soared. So the University of Oxford is involved in a newly set up journal called Conversation, which aims to counter fake news by making high quality research accessible in blog format and articles. And I think it's enormously important to invest in good, high quality Wissenschaftskommunikation, to really get out into the public in a format that doesn't dumb down research, but makes it really tangible what the significance of it is. Whether it's COVID or environment or Brexit, it's really a responsibility for academia to take on this role.
Okay, let's stay there for one last question concerning science communication as well. You're very active on Twitter. And what role does the news networking service Twitter play in your everyday academic life?
I started doing this when I was still at Newcastle and was responsible as webmaster to build up the social media platforms, and experimented with different forms of media communication. The weirdest one was to build up a Weibo account, which is the Chinese Twitter equivalent, because Newcastle is recruiting for its translation program heavily in China, and there you have to be on that platform, which is only accessible in Chinese. So I had to have Google Translate open all the time while translating back and forth information. And I realized that Twitter is a really good way of showcasing research, but also to do open access ways of how to conduct research, because quite often I will put out real questions to the community, A, to get an answer, obviously, but B, also to show how new knowledge is generated. So as a kind of didactic question keeping. And when I arrived in Oxford, I took over a long-running course for master students, which at that point consisted of paleography and history of the book. And I added as a third element digital humanities. And this has worked really, really well to get students engaged, taking the resources that are here in Oxford and sharing them with the world. So last year, for example, I had a master student who was curious to find out whether one edition of Comenius, Amos Comenius, a textbook for teaching Latin, was indeed the only copy in existence, as the catalogue claimed in the Tellurian. So she started a media campaign, Show Us Your Janua. Janua Linguarum is the title of this Latin textbook, and got over 150 librarians to engage and send back title pages of their copies, finding out that indeed it's the only copy known so far. All the other title pages were for different editions. But so highlighting the holdings here, but also building up a network across the Twitter universe. So we have a blog running to which all the students are encouraged to submit regularly their results, but also their questions. And I think that's the most important part, not to present research as something that is a closed business, but something that is engaging and open.
Thank you, Professor Lähnemann. Thank you for talking to us. It was very inspiring.